It happens in small moments: a name forgotten, a face that feels distant, a word you once knew so well, now slipping through your fingers. It's as if time itself is gently, but steadily, erasing the edges of what once felt so solid. There is a peculiar silence that comes with this process. It's not loud or jarring, it is a quiet retreat, like the setting sun that fades so gradually you hardly notice until the sky is dark. In the spaces between these small disappearances, the reality of cognitive decline settles in. It's not just the forgetting of facts or memories. No, it is the unraveling of a familiar world, the shifting of a once constant sense of self. The person who once felt in control, who could recall the details of their past with ease, is now adrift in a sea of lost moments. And yet they continue to navigate their lives, with an unfamiliar fog casting shadows on their every step. There is a profound sadness that accompanies this loss, not just the loss of memories, but of identity. When the foundation of one's mind begins to erode, the ripple effects are felt not only within the mind itself, but throughout every relationship, every role, every connection. The very thing that anchored them to their world, their mind, begins to slip away. And yet there is no manual for this experience, no guide to help make sense of the strange disintegration that quietly takes hold. It doesn't come with clear signs, no definitive moment that marks the beginning of the end. Instead, it arrives in the small, unspoken ways: the forgotten conversations, the misplaced keys, the lapses in thought that feel like the cracks in an otherwise perfect facade. To witness this process is to understand that time does not simply change a person, it redefines them. The experience of cognitive decline is not just the loss of faculties, it is the slow reshaping of what it means to be human. In a world that values intellect and clarity, what happens to those who can no longer rely on their minds the way they once did? What is left when memory, the very core of who we are, begins to fade? This question looms over the landscape of aging, both for those experiencing it and for those who watch from the outside, helpless to stop the inevitable drift. It is not merely a process of physical decline, but of existential redefinition. To lose memory is in some ways to lose touch with the very essence of oneself. But even as cognitive decline becomes more visible, it is important to ask, where does it come from? What causes this slow, persistent erosion of the mind? And more importantly, how do we, as humans, come to terms with it? The roots of this process are buried deep within the complexities of aging itself. While the outer signs of growing older, gray hair, wrinkles, a slower gait, are readily acknowledged, the inner workings of the mind are more elusive. The mind doesn't wear its age as visibly as the body does, and yet it too is subject to the wear and tear of time. To understand cognitive decline, we must first understand the nature of memory, the brain, and how they change as we grow older. As we age, our brains undergo numerous physical changes. Some of these changes are visible: a decrease in the size of certain regions of the brain, a decline in the efficiency of neurotransmitters, the loss of neurons in specific areas like the hippocampus, which is central to memory and learning. Other changes are more subtle, occurring at the cellular level, affecting the way neurons communicate with each other, slowing the processing of information. These shifts don't happen all at once. Rather, they accumulate over time, often without noticeable symptoms until they reach a certain threshold. And while some degree of cognitive decline is a natural part of aging, the pace and extent of this decline varies significantly from person to person. For some, the changes are so gradual that they barely notice. They may misplace their keys more often or forget the names of distant acquaintances, but these lapses are brushed aside as mere inconveniences of aging. For others, however, the changes are more pronounced, beginning to interfere with their ability to perform everyday tasks, to recognize loved ones, or even to make sense of the world around them. It is in this space between the gradual and the pronounced that cognitive decline becomes truly unsettling. The person who once held clarity and control over their thoughts now faces a world that feels increasingly foreign. And yet, despite this growing alienation, they are still very much themselves. They may not always remember the details, but they still feel the emotional weight of their experiences. The person remains intact, even when their mind is not. This tension between the continuity of the self and the erosion of memory is where the complexity of cognitive decline lies. It is not just a medical condition. It is a deeply human experience that touches on the very core of what it means to be alive, to be aware, to remember. And it is this very conflict, the fight to hold on to who we are, even as we forget, that makes the journey through cognitive decline so poignant, so quietly devastating. In these moments, when the mind begins to wane, the person still exists, still breathes, still feels, still hopes. And in this, perhaps, there is a bittersweet truth. Even as the mind unravels, the heart remains. Underscore 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 Next, part 2. Root cause origins. Word count 950. Cognitive decline is not an isolated event, nor is it a singular experience. It is the culmination of decades of subtle changes, a tapestry of life lived and forgotten, woven together by the threads of age. At its core, cognitive decline is a manifestation of the brain's intricate, delicate nature, its vulnerability to the passage of time. To truly understand its origins, one must first appreciate the brain's remarkable complexity. Every thought, every memory, every piece of knowledge is stored and processed in intricate networks of neurons. These neural pathways, formed and refined throughout a lifetime, are the blueprint of our existence. They shape how we experience the world, how we relate to others, and how we understand ourselves. But like any intricate system, the brain is not immune to wear and tear. Over the years, as we grow older, the cells in our brain, just like those in the rest of our body, begin to degrade. Neurons lose their ability to communicate as efficiently. Synapses, the small gaps between neurons through which messages are sent, become less effective. The chemicals that help neurons transmit signals, such as dopamine and serotonin, decrease in production. These subtle disruptions in communication create a ripple effect, gradually impacting the way the brain processes information. In particular, the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for the formation of new memories, is one of the first to show signs of decline. As neurons in the hippocampus die off, the ability to form and recall memories is compromised. This is often one of the earliest and most noticeable signs of cognitive decline. Forgetting names, missing appointments, and struggling to remember where you put your keys are all early indicators of what may eventually lead to more severe memory impairment. But the hippocampus is not the only part of the brain affected by aging. As time goes on, the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for decision-making, problem-solving, and emotional regulation, also begins to show signs of decline. This part of the brain is particularly susceptible to aging, as it controls complex cognitive processes that require focus and attention. When the prefrontal cortex weakens, it becomes harder to think clearly, make decisions, or control impulses. These brain changes, however, are not all detrimental. In fact, some studies suggest that older adults may experience certain types of cognitive improvement as they age, such as a deeper understanding of life's complexities or the ability to better navigate social relationships. Experience, after all, brings wisdom, but these gains are often tempered by the cognitive losses that come with aging. It is this delicate balance between the wisdom of age and the decline of cognitive function that shapes the experience of growing older. While aging alone can lead to cognitive decline, the process is further complicated by a variety of other factors. Genetics play a significant role in how one's brain ages. Some individuals may have a genetic predisposition that makes them more vulnerable to cognitive decline. For example, the presence of the APOE4 gene is linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, a condition that accelerates the process of cognitive decline. Those with this gene may experience more rapid memory loss and cognitive deterioration than those without it. But genetics is not the sole determinant. Lifestyle factors also have a profound impact on the aging brain. Diet, exercise, sleep, and mental stimulation can all influence the rate at which cognitive decline occurs. A diet rich in antioxidants, healthy fats, and vitamins can help protect the brain from damage, while regular physical activity can improve blood flow to the brain, encouraging the growth of new neurons. Sleep, too, plays a crucial role in cognitive health, as it is during rest that the brain consolidates memories and clears out toxins that accumulate during the day. Mental stimulation is another vital factor in maintaining cognitive function. Engaging in activities that challenge the brain, such as reading, learning new skills, or playing musical instruments, can help preserve memory and cognitive abilities. Just as muscles weaken without use, so too does the brain when it is not regularly exercised. But even with all these positive habits in place, there is no foolproof way to prevent cognitive decline entirely. The brain, like any organ, is subject to the inevitable forces of aging. Environmental factors also contribute to cognitive health. Chronic stress, for example, has been shown to have a negative impact on the brain, particularly on the hippocampus. Long-term stress can lead to an excess of cortisol, a hormone that in high levels can damage brain cells and impair memory. Social isolation and lack of emotional support can also accelerate cognitive decline. The brain thrives in environments that nurture emotional connections, where individuals feel loved, valued, and understood. When these connections are severed, when loneliness and isolation take hold, the effects on the brain can be profound. Ultimately, cognitive decline is the result of an intricate interplay of biological, genetic, lifestyle, and environmental factors. It is not the result of any one thing, but rather the slow accumulation of small changes over time. Like the weathering of stone, these changes may go unnoticed for years, until one day the cracks are too visible to ignore. And yet, this decline, though inevitable, is not entirely one-dimensional. It is not just a loss of mental clarity, but the gradual transformation of the mind itself. As the mind loses its grasp on the past, it also learns to live differently in the present. The fading of memory, in some ways, creates space for new experiences, new connections, and new ways of seeing the world. For every memory lost, there is the potential for new emotional understanding, for deeper connections with the present moment. It is important to remember that cognitive decline does not diminish the essence of a person. Even as memory fades, the heart continues to beat, the soul continues to feel. It is not the end of a story, but a shift in the narrative, a transition from what was to what is now, and in that shift, there is beauty, there is grace, and there is always the potential for the mind, even in its decline, to find new paths, new rhythms, and new ways to connect with the world. Underscore, 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 underscore. Next part 3. Scientific psychological explanation. Word count 950. The journey through cognitive decline is both deeply personal and scientifically intricate. To understand this process, we must venture beyond the surface of everyday forgetfulness and explore the underlying mechanisms that govern the mind's gradual fading. What exactly happens inside the brain when memory begins to slip away, when thinking becomes clouded, and when clarity of thought is no longer taken for granted? At the heart of this transformation is the brain's complex architecture, which, though awe-inspiring in its design, is not immune to the wear and tear of time. As the brain ages, the neurons responsible for communication between different regions begin to break down. The synapses, tiny delicate connections that transmit electrical signals between neurons, become weaker, and over time, less efficient. It is these synapses that allow for the processing of information, the creation of memories, and the very fabric of thought itself. But this breakdown is not a sudden rupture. It is more like a slow erosion, occurring gradually over many years. The initial changes are subtle, minor lapses in memory, a slight delay in processing information. These changes, though unsettling, often go unnoticed at first. But as time progresses, the effects become more pronounced. Neural connections weaken further, and cognitive abilities, once sharp and reliable, begin to dull. Perhaps the most significant factor in this decline is the gradual atrophy of the hippocampus. the area of the brain most closely associated with memory formation. The hippocampus is responsible for consolidating new memories, transforming fleeting moments into long-term recollections. As neurons in this region die off or lose their ability to communicate effectively, the capacity to store and retrieve memories diminishes. The person begins to forget names, places, and events that once felt vivid and concrete. What was once an immediate recall of the past becomes a distant echo, a faint trace of a memory slipping away. Yet the hippocampus is not alone in its decline. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for higher cognitive functions such as decision-making, problem-solving, and emotional regulation, also undergoes significant changes with age. This area of the brain is involved in managing complex thoughts, focusing attention, and inhibiting impulsive behavior. As the prefrontal cortex weakens, individuals may struggle to plan, organize, or control their emotions in the same way they once did. It becomes harder to make decisions, particularly in moments of stress or uncertainty. What once felt like second nature, remembering a routine, organizing tasks, making decisions, is now a laborious process that requires more conscious effort. At the level of neurotransmitters, there is a notable decline in the chemicals that facilitate communication between neurons. Neurotransmitters like dopamine, which plays a key role in motivation, focus, and movement, decrease with age. This reduction can lead to feelings of sluggishness or difficulty concentrating. Serotonin, another critical neurotransmitter, also decreases, impacting mood regulation and emotional well-being. The loss of these chemicals doesn't just affect memory, it also alters how a person feels about themselves and the world around them. Emotions become harder to manage, and a sense of detachment from the self can emerge. The world may begin to feel less vibrant, less engaging, as the chemicals that once allowed for joy, motivation, and connection begin to fade. The brain, like the rest of the body, also experiences a decrease in blood flow as a person ages. The arteries supplying blood to the brain can become narrower and less efficient, depriving the brain cells of the oxygen and nutrients they need to function at their optimal capacity. This can contribute to cognitive decline by limiting the brain's ability to produce energy and perform complex tasks. As the brain's energy supply diminishes, the functions that once felt effortless, thinking, remembering, learning, become more difficult and exhausting. But cognitive decline is not merely the result of biological inevitability. It is also shaped by psychological factors. The human mind is intricately connected to the body, and stress, trauma, and emotional experiences can exacerbate the physical processes of aging. Chronic stress, for example, can significantly affect cognitive function. Prolonged exposure to stress hormones like cortisol can damage the brain's neurons, particularly in areas associated with memory. The hippocampus is especially vulnerable to the effects of stress, making it more susceptible to damage as a person ages. Further complicating this process is the emotional impact of cognitive decline itself. For those who experience the early signs of memory loss, there is often a deep sense of fear, frustration, and confusion. The person may begin to doubt their own mind, feeling disconnected from the very thing that has always defined their sense of self. This psychological strain can create a vicious cycle. The more a person struggles with cognitive decline, the more stress and anxiety they experience, which in turn exacerbates the decline. The mind becomes trapped in a loop of fear and helplessness, each memory lost feeling like another fracture in the person's identity. There is also the issue of isolation. As cognitive decline progresses, individuals may begin to withdraw from social activities, either because they cannot remember the details of conversations, or because they feel embarrassed by their lapses in memory. Social withdrawal can further accelerate the cognitive decline, as interaction with others is essential for maintaining mental sharpness. Loneliness, too, can have a detrimental effect on cognitive health. Studies have shown that social isolation can increase the risk of dementia and other cognitive disorders. The absence of emotional connections can create a void, leaving the mind more vulnerable to the effects of aging. In this complex web of biological, psychological, and emotional factors, it becomes clear that cognitive decline is not just a mechanical process of losing memories or thoughts. It is an intricate interplay between the mind and body, a reflection of the profound changes that accompany aging. While there is no way to fully prevent this decline, there is a deep need to understand it, to acknowledge its existence, and to accept that it is part of the natural course of life. And in that understanding, there is the possibility for compassion. Compassion for oneself and for others, navigating the often difficult journey of cognitive decline. Perhaps then, the most important realization is that cognitive decline does not define a person. It is but one chapter in a much larger story, one that is still unfolding, even as the mind shifts and changes. It is in the acceptance of this transformation, the recognition of the fragility of the human mind, that the true essence of being human is found. And in that acceptance, there is the possibility for peace, for understanding, and for grace. Underscore 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 underscore. And though it may change course, it is always moving forward, always seeking the flow. Call to action. As we reflect on the complexity of cognitive decline, let us approach this natural part of aging with empathy, understanding, and patience for ourselves and for others who walk this delicate path. Script is finished.